Well, today doing a webinar is one of my favorite ways to do a presentation. I just affirmed that as 30 seconds before I sat down at my desk, I poured an entire glass of water down the front of my pants and no one can see it. So, haha, it's a joke. Actually, that's actually true. I'm sitting in wet pants. So hopefully by the time we get done, we'll be dry. I'm going to go ahead and jump in. First few minutes here are going to be sort of introductory, and then we'll go. I got a couple of times scheduled throughout the content that I'm presenting today that will give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So if you're a good note taker, you can take some good notes. You can pop questions in the chat, or you can just write them down as we go, and then I'll answer as we get there. I'm going to keep my eye on the admission to make sure that I'm letting people in as they need to come in. I still have a few people popping in here, but I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to join me for this. This is something I'm really passionate about, and I really love to have the opportunity to share with churches how they can reach more people online. We have a combination of people on the webinar today. The majority of churches represented here are part of the Charis Fellowship. There are a few churches that are not part of Charis Fellowship, just different people that I've connected with or have connected with me on the internet, and we're interested in participating in this today. So thanks everybody for being here. I am recording this session. Some of you are probably going to have some questions afterwards. Maybe you want to refer back to some things, or maybe you'll want to share the content of this webinar with somebody on your team, somebody on your staff, or a volunteer. And so I'll make that available. To you via email. I'll post it on our YouTube channel and share that with you after the fact. Just wanted to give you kind of a brief introduction as to who I am and what I do. So my name is Bart Blair, and I have just over 16 years of pastoral ministry experience. I am an ordained pastor in the Charis Fellowship, which is where I've served all of my ministry life. I'm the communications director for a ministry that serves the Charis Fellowship called Assist Church Expansion. And we work with churches to help them multiply through church planting, through church multi-site ventures. And then we're doing a lot of work with churches in our fellowship on revitalization and restart. It's been a very exciting time for me to be a part of this team. We have a lot of great things going on. I'm also a digital strategy consultant. So I work with an agency out of Phoenix called Missional Marketing, and do some consulting work for them. And I also live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I do consulting with a number of churches here in the Dallas area where I live. And they range in size from churches that are church plants. I've got a neighbor across the street who just launched a brand new church plant last fall, and I've been doing some work with him and his team. And I work with several large multi-site mega churches in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, helping them do digital strategies as well. I built my first website in 1998. There were barely any websites on the internet at that time, and I was living in the Washington, D.C. area. I was working in a secular job. I'd sort of dabbled around on the internet a little bit, and had a friend who had a theater company in the Washington, D.C. area, and he also had season tickets to Washington Redskins games. And somehow we ended up with a barter, and he said if I could build a website for him, he would give me his tickets to the Dallas Cowboys Washington Redskins game. And as a lifelong Dallas Cowboy fan, that was worth it to me. So I went and bought a copy of Microsoft Front Page and learned how to build a website. And I've built many websites over the course of the last 20 plus years. I had a small window in my ministry life where I was bivocational, and my second vocation was actually working for a church a website development company that built websites for schools and school districts. So that's really kind of been my experience in terms of sort of building websites. But communications is something that I've had a passion for, something that I've had the opportunity to do in churches, as well as with some other parachurch ministries and parachurch organizations. And it's just something I've dedicated a lot of time and energy into studying. And so I've kind of put together this webinar to share with you things that I've learned and things that I hope through best practices, you'll be able to implement some of these things in your church and reach more people. That's my story, and I'm just going to presuppose your story. Some of you here are actually church leaders, you're pastors, you're on staff of a church. Some of you are volunteers. Some of you are preparing to start new churches. Some of you are just curious as to who it is that I am and what it is that I'm going to talk about. And so, but some of the presuppositions I'm going to make is that at the end of the day, you would like to see your church reach more people. You would like to be a part of a church that's making and growing new disciples, and that you want to steward the digital resources that you have at your disposal. I've been doing this particular webinar in person and online for about 1.5 years now. And I'm having to change it as we go, because as you all know, with COVID-19 and other things that are happening in the world, our online presence is just getting to be more and more important for our churches. And so if you downloaded the workbook, I did that webinar 3 months ago and put that workbook together 3 months ago, and it's already out of date. I've already added some new things to this material I'm going to be presenting with you today. So like I said, I hope that you're taking good notes. But like I said, these are the things that I'm hoping that you are looking for, because this is what I'm hoping to help you do, to reach more people, to make and grow more disciples, and to steward the digital resources that you have at your disposal in a God-honoring way and in the most responsible way. This graph here that I'm going to show you is the story of two companies. One that chose to embrace new and emerging technology, and one that didn't. At one point in time, the company profiled in blue was worth $5 billion in the year 2000 and was worth almost $6 billion by the year 2004. But then some new technologies and some new things came along the way. And by 2012, that company didn't exist anymore. In fact, in 2000, where this graph starts, it was a dominant force. It was a household name. And I didn't know anybody, at least in urban centers or suburban centers, that weren't utilizing the services of this particular company. The company profiled in red is a company that had a different vision for how to basically provide the same services and leverage technology to do it. And that company, as of the year 2016, was worth $8 billion. 4 years later today, it's actually worth $194 billion. And it probably wouldn't surprise you if I told you that these two companies are Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster actually offered to purchase Netflix in the year 2000 for $50 million, which at the time seemed insane. All Netflix was doing at that time was mailing DVDs to people's homes. And Blockbuster saw it as a supplement to its business, not competition to its business. But obviously by the 2009, 2010, things started to change pretty dramatically. Netflix launched the streaming platform in 2007, and we've seen it do nothing but go up. And, Netflix it's a household word now, just like Blockbuster was, 20 years ago. And of course, Netflix has a lot more competition today than it ever has before, but its value is still extreme. Now, the church is never going to go the way of Blockbuster. We're never going to go bankrupt. We've read the story. We know how it ends, and the church is going to do just fine in the end. But I think there's a lesson that we can take in terms of the local church. The local church is where we tend to see more resistance to change and more resistance to new technology and new ideas. And so from a local church standpoint, I just want to challenge us all to be thinking about how we can leverage the technology that's available to us today in a way that's going to be kingdom focused and kingdom centered and really help us make more disciples and grow more disciples. Your church's website is the front door of your ministry. In fact, I would go along to say that in some cases, your buildings are still closed and your website is your entire ministry at this point. It's not just the front door, it's the lobby, the living room, and everything else. We're going to talk a little bit about social media today, not a ton, but here's the way when people ask me about the value versus website versus social media, I'll say that social media, I tend to think of it more like the front porch and the website being the front door. The website is where people really get a good look into your ministry, who you are as a church and how you function, how you operate, what you have to offer. Social media is a great way to get people's attention. being on Facebook, being on Instagram, being on TikTok, or whatever social media platforms your church chooses to make use of is a great way to get people's attention. But it's kind of like standing on the front porch, and as people drive by, maybe they ride by on a bicycle, or maybe they're jogging by or just walking by, you can wave and you can have some casual conversation, but it's really not the place where you're going to have the highest level of engagement. And so that's kind of the way that I think about the website versus social media, front porch versus front door. It's highly unlikely that anyone is ever going to check you out in person without first checking you out online. Most people these days are first going to look at your social media platform, perhaps, and they're going to look at your website, and they're going to explore and investigate who you are and what you're all about before they ever venture into your facility, into your church ministry space. I think it's super, super important that we realize that even though we might have a first impressions team, hospitality team, people who are there to welcome people, maybe it's a welcome team at your church building, at your church services on Sunday morning, your first impression is typically your website and your web presence. And so that's really sort of the framework that we're going to work from today, is thinking about how we're going to engage people on the internet, online, and how we're going to move them to a place where they engage with us on our websites. Nona Jones, this quote is actually from a few years ago, but she's the leader of global faith-based partnerships for Facebook. She and her husband actually lead a church, I believe, in California. And she made this statement a couple of years ago: ministry is no longer just happening inside four walls, it's happening at URLs. And for those of you who don't know what a URL is, that's where a website is parked. Nona Jones has actually been in the news quite a bit lately because she just recently released a book. I haven't yet read it, but it is a book about ministry online, being able to leverage ministry, your online presence and online platforms for doing ministry. So this is something, again, we just need to realize is a reality. And of course, many of our churches, many of you have had to make a significant pivot over the course of the last few months to have a stronger web presence and some sort of worship experience online. And so you realize that this is actually a true statement and probably never been more true. Notwithstanding everything else that I'm going to share with you today, before we get into the meat of this webinar, I want to clarify one thing, and that is that as a person who is intent on helping churches reach more people in their community and making more disciples, I believe that the number one most effective way for reaching people in our community is through personal invitation. It's not the internet. I think the internet is a great tool. Digital resources are a great tool for us to do evangelism, to reach people, to conduct ministry. But I've never seen anything in my life that's more effective than the people in your church being excited and energized and being the evangelists for both the gospel as well as for your church. I believe that right now we're in a weird state where not everyone can have people coming to their church buildings on a Sunday morning. And so even leveraging your relationships with people in your church online to have them inviting people and connecting people to your church online is pretty pivotal. But the personal invitation is always going to carry more weight than anything else that we're talking about today. Not that the things that we're talking about today aren't important, but I just wanted to just sort of pause on that and help you understand that that's my belief. I think that the digital outreach strategy is important for every church, but a personal outreach strategy is the most important thing. The reality is people live online. People are on the internet. The average American is on the internet many, many times a day, whether it's social media or utilizing a search engine like Google. Most people are using Google. There are a few others out there. You've heard of them: Bing, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo. There's a few, but Google is kind of the dominant force in the search engine world. And people are online, and people are looking for help. They're looking for hope. They're looking for solutions to problems, and they're looking for churches. And my goal today is to help you see how you can be more present in the responses that people are finding online when they're looking for answers to some of life's most challenging questions. What we're going to cover specifically today is 3 keys to reaching people online. This is actually the part that I've kind of added in the last couple of months that's not in your notes. So we're going to kind of cover that here in just a moment. We're going to talk about some technical components of how people actually find your website online. I know that, many of us think that people They know our web address. They know where to find us, and they just show up there. But there's actually some intricacy to making sure that your website is technically set up to make sure that people can find you online. And then we're also going to talk about some tactical elements of your website to make it more visitor friendly. Many of you are part of churches, lead churches, where you have actually gone to great lengths to create a visitor friendly experience for people in your physical location on Sunday morning. But that's not always said about our website and the first impression that we make. And so I want to give you some tactical things that you can do on your website to help you have a more guest-friendly, visitor-friendly experience at that first impression. Your church website traffic consists of 3 audiences. There are 3 different groups of people. I talk about them in terms of rings. The first, ring 1, are your people. These are the people that actually attend your church. They know you. They know where to find you online. You're not a mystery to them. They don't need to Google you to find you. They just type the name of your church into their search bar or into their browser bar, and they come to your website. Ring 1 people might also be people who only connect with you 2 times a year, Christmas and Easter. You might not even know them all, but they are your people. Ring 2 people are people who are in your geographic area who are looking for a church. They are physically searching something related to church near me, church in my neighborhood, church in Auburn, California. They're using keywords in their searches that are related to a church. Now, these might be Christian people. They might not be Christian people. They might be people who have recently moved to your area, and they're a church person and they're looking for a new church. They could be people who have lived in your area for a while and their church is just closed, or it's been through some sort of leadership transition and they're no longer comfortable at their church. It could be people who grew up in church, left church for a really long time, and now they're married and they've got kids and they want to give their children a spiritual foundation. So they're looking for a church. Could be people who are looking for a church to have a wedding or a funeral. They're not Christian people at all. But the key here is that they're using church-related keywords in their search online. The third ring is everybody else. And when I say everybody else, I mean everybody else, because everyone else is using the internet, and people use the internet to solve problems. These are people who are looking for a solution to a problem. They're using the internet to find a way to meet a need. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what some of those specific things are that they're searching for, but it's really the vast majority of your community. Your church website is designed to reach the people you know. They know where to find you. They know how to get the content they need. The church calendar is online. The pastor's email address or phone number are there. They've got registration for their small group or registration for the latest event. Your website is, I guarantee, it's designed to meet the needs of those people perfectly. Your website might reach some of those people that you don't know who are in that ring 2 category. It might, if it's built and designed to be found in search. Most of us don't think about that, but there's a very important element for us to consider, and we're going to look at some of the ways that that works in the digital world. Most church websites will not ever reach people who are not actively looking for you. You may be able to solve the problem that they're searching for. You may have the content on your website. You may have a ministry in your church that could address that need. But most church websites are not designed in a way where they're going to show up in those searches so that people can actually find you. What are those things that people are searching for? They're searching for help with their marriage, help with parenting, help with grief, help with debt. Sometimes they're asking spiritual questions. Who is Jesus? Does prayer work? What's my purpose? How can I forgive someone? If you got online right now and you searched, who is Jesus? There will not be any churches that show up on the first page of that website. Wikipedia is probably the first thing that comes up. And in some searches I do, every once in a while, the Latter-day Saints and the Jehovah's Witnesses have pages that pop on the first page. And I'd challenge you, church leaders, to consider if those are the sources that we want people going to get answer to the question about who Jesus is. And so we're going to talk about some strategies today that will help you show up in the searches when people are asking those types of questions. If Google and its counterpart YouTube have not done anything else in the world, they have created a DIY lifestyle like never before. People are doing it themselves by searching the internet. I'll be the first to admit that I had some questions about some financial investments that I needed, and it was easier for me to get on Google and Google answers to the question. Trying to figure out how to connect a camera to my computer, I Google it. Last summer, my 17-year-old got his first car last summer. The day we brought that car home, he pulled up a YouTube video to learn how to install a component on the stereo, and within 30 minutes had the full front panel of the car pulled off. DIY, do it yourself. Now, those are very simple, tangible examples of DIYing it. But I can show you, if we had more time, we could get into it, the stats of people actually searching things like help with their marriage, help with finances, help with anxiety and depression and these types of things. And many of us have ministries in our churches that would help people and address them with these things. Most of you pastors have preached sermons that would answer the questions that people are asking. And I have zero doubt that these questions like who is Jesus and does prayer work and what's my purpose, we all know how to answer those questions. We all, as pastors and church leaders, know that if we had the opportunity to have conversations with people asking those questions, we would jump at them, especially people right in our own community, in our neighborhood. To give you an example of the volume of search that's happening on these types of keywords, just as an example, because our fellowship has so many people in the Columbus area, I picked Columbus. Columbus has a population of just under 880,000 people. And monthly in the greater Columbus area, there were almost 85,000 felt need searches based on those types of keywords that I just showed you: help with finances, help with marriage, help with parenting, faith-based questions. 85,000 a month. We're talking close to, 1 million questions asked of Google every year just in the Columbus, Ohio area. And you can think about your own geographic area, and maybe it's smaller, maybe it's larger, but people are out there and people are looking for answers. They're looking for hope. They're looking for help, and they're using Google to find the answers. Most of us think about our website as being a tool for our church family and how we can help them know where they need to be and when they need to be there, and how they can watch last week's sermon when they weren't able to show up to church, or how they can register for the upcoming event or activity. But I want to bring a little Jesus into this and just challenge you to reconsider the way that you use your website and the way that you use your social media. Think about it as a way of reaching that lost sheep that Jesus said we need to consider his needs greater than the needs of the found. The lost sheep's needs are greater than those of the ones that are found. And so sometimes it might mean we make some sacrifices on our website and the investment that we make in our digital media, and find better ways of communicating to our church family other than our website, so that we can leverage the tool of our website and our other online media to reach the people who haven't yet met Jesus and don't yet follow him. The 3 keys to reaching people online. This is new content, so this is not in your workbook. I've spent a ton of time over the last few months during the COVID crisis trying to really put into words in some sort of simple format what I see working in churches that are figuring out how to make it work. And the 3 keys to reaching people online: the first is outreach, the second is content, the third is connection. And I'm going to break each of these down and give you some practical examples of how each of these works. Outreach, being the first one, is simply anything that you do that informs people who do not know that you exist, that you exist. Now, this is the same as if you were doing outreach in your neighborhood, in your community. If you were doing servant evangelism projects, or you were doing outreach activities, what you're essentially doing is you're trying to introduce yourself to people in your community who may or may not know that you exist. You want them to know that you exist. And the same thing is true with our online outreach. When we think about the things that we do on the internet, when we do online, on social media, we're trying to inform people who don't know that we exist that we actually exist. That's the first step in reaching people online. It's outreach. No different than you would think about it in terms of reaching people in your community in a physical way. The second piece is content. Content is anything that you distribute online that allows people to decide if you're a good fit. Now, if you are doing physical outreach in your community, in your neighborhood, a big part of what you're doing is you're engaging with them, you're initiating relationship with them. Perhaps you're inviting them to other events and activities that you're doing. Perhaps you're even inviting them to your church services on Sunday morning. And all the while, what they're doing is they're sizing you up. You may not realize it, but they're sizing you up and they're trying to decide if you're a good fit for them. Well, whether you know this or not, people are doing that to you online as well. When you distribute content online, when you do any kind of outreach, people are exploring your social media, they're exploring your website. And Pastor, the person who doesn't know you, who didn't know you last week, is not listening to your sermon because they're expecting to have their life impacted or their life changed in some way by that single sermon. They're trying to decide if they can trust you. They're trying to decide if you're a good fit for them. They're checking out your website to see if this looks like it will be a good community for me. So anything and everything that you distribute, your social media, your website content, your sermons, everything that you do, you need to consider the fact that there are people out there that are consuming that content, not because they're trying to grow in their spiritual journey, but because they're trying to decide if you're a good fit for them. So the second phase of our outreach strategy is content. The third is connection. The point at which a new person provides you their personal information, giving you permission to communicate with them. Now, again, we do this in a physical church setting. People come on a Sunday morning and they're consuming the content. They're listening to the music. They're listening to the sermon. Their kids are in the children's ministry. And we're asking them every Sunday morning if they'll fill out a connection card. We would love for you to fill out a connection card. We've got a free gift if you'll fill out a connection card. Very few people will fill out that connection card the first time. Why? Because they're still trying to figure out if you're a good fit. They're still checking you out. They're kicking the tires. Now, eventually, they're going to hopefully fill out that connection card, or they're going to register for some event or some activity, at which time they're giving you their data. They're giving you their email address, their phone number. They're initiating back towards you and saying, I now give you permission to know me. I'm making a commitment that we're going to have some kind of relationship. I don't know where that's going yet, but there's some level of connection here. And the same thing is true with our online engagement. We're bringing people to our website. Maybe it's through our social media or other campaigns that we're doing. They're exploring us online. At some point in time, we're hoping that they will initiate towards us and give us permission to connect with them. There are a variety of different ways that we can do that, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. I want to share with you a story of a couple that was attending my church in Alberta. I planted a church in Southeast Alberta and pastored there for about 7 years. And for most of the time that we were there, we were actually posting our sermons online. We had a lot of people that worked out of town, and we had sermon-based small groups. So even though we didn't have real high production quality or anything, we made our sermons available online every single week. They went online every Monday morning.
Come in.
And there was a Sunday that this couple came up to me after the church service, after I'd preached, and essentially basically began to kind of expose their entire lives to me. And the nicest way I could say it, they basically began to confess all their sin to me. Their life was a mess, and they knew it was a mess. They were believers. They had not been connected in a church in quite some time. They were living together. They weren't married. They had kids that they had brought into this relationship. And they were just, there was a lot of a challenge going on in their life. And as they stood there after that church service and they kind of poured out their hearts to me and they got emotional about it and they wept. And this is the first time I met them. And my church was about 100 people. So it wasn't hard to know that it was the first time that they'd ever attended the church. And all I could think to say when they were done, I don't know if they were expecting a counseling session in that moment or what their actual expectation was, but all I could think to say was, I want to commend you for your courage. I said, it took a lot of courage for you to come and share all that detail about your life with me because I'm a perfect stranger. And I'll never forget his response to me when I said that. He dropped his head and he slumped his shoulders and he said, well, we've been watching your sermons online for the last year, so I guess we felt like we knew you. And that was an aha moment for me because our church, we posted our videos online and maybe, on a good week, 20 or 25 people would watch the video. And that when I say a good week, that means that a whole lot of people who didn't show up to church on Sunday watched the video before they went to their small group on Wednesday because they knew it was going to be based on the sermon. So a good week of video views meant usually a low week in attendance. But I had no idea that this couple had been watching our sermons online for a year. And it took them a year to both decide that we were a good fit and they wanted to take action. It probably took them a year to get over the shame that they were experiencing, that they were feeling about the life that they were living. And it changed everything for them. We got them headed in a positive direction. I married them a few months later, and it was life-changing. It was life-changing for them, but it was also an epiphany for me in terms of the value of what we're doing online and how we can engage with people who are watching us that we don't even know are watching us. Let's talk a little bit about outreach and what this actually looks like online. In fact, I say a little bit, this is actually going to be the bulk of what we're going to talk about today in terms of how we actually use tools on the internet to do outreach. And so for those of you who are technical people, you know websites, you know digital marketing and this sort of stuff, this is going to hopefully scratch an itch that you're looking for. Some of you are going to feel like you're completely in the weeds, and this might be too technical for you, which is why I'm recording this webinar, and I will make this available to you later so that you can share it with someone else who might be able to help you navigate through some of these things. I'm going to try not to go too deep into the valleys, but stay mostly mountaintop to mountaintop. And I'm going to talk about 3 specific ways that we can do digital outreach that will connect us with more Ring 2 and Ring 3 people. Remember, this is not connecting with Ring 1 people. This is not a solution to how to do discipleship online. This is purely how we're going to reach more people who don't yet know that we exist. The 3 ways that we can do that online, one is organic, one is interruptive, and one is pay-per-click, PPC, or some cases you might hear it called CPC, cost per click. And I'm going to give you some highlights of each of those and some of the things that you can do to be more effective in each of them. We're going to talk first about organic, and there's 2 different types of organic reach with our website. There's organic local and there's organic search. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes about organic local because this is probably one of the most overlooked aspects of our church website, our church internet presence, okay? If you don't hear anything else that I say today, this is the part I want you to really, really take home because this is super, super important. What I have on the screen is what's called a Google Local Pack. And you've probably seen one of these when you do a search. If you searched orthodontist near me, or Chinese restaurant near me, or grocery store near me, you will get what's called the Google Local Pack, assuming you're using Google. You will get a Bing. Bing has an equivalent. It's called the Bing Local. So Google Local Pack. And what you typically get, whether you're on desktop or on mobile, is you get a map. And that map, in this particular case, I live right here where the blue dot is. Actually, I lived there a year ago when I created this slide. And all of these red dots represent churches. And then these 3 big ones here are the churches that show up here in the local pack: Frisco First United Methodist, Hope Fellowship Frisco East, and Providence Church. So this is called the local pack. We want your church to be in the local pack. If you click down here at the bottom where it says more places, it'll open up that menu and it'll show you the top 20 search results in the local search, okay? Beneath that is a set of organic search returns. Most of the time are populated by Yelp or Yellow Pages or some sort of platform that gives listings of churches or ratings of churches. Now there are 3 specific things, actually take that back. There are 4 specific things that Google uses to determine which churches are in the local pack. You might ask, well, there's the blue dot. Why are the 3 churches there chosen to be in the local pack? Why not some of these others? Well, the factors that play into that are, one is physical location. Needless to say, if it's a local search, the geography of where the person is searching, whether they're on a mobile device or whether they're on their desktop or a tablet, Google is looking at the physical location. Depending on the density of the population where you live, then that range may be wider. If you're I'm in a pretty densely populated area, and I live in an area where there's a church on every corner. And so it's a pretty narrow search range for me. Some of you who live in more rural areas, you might get a wider geographic search when Google gives you your search results. The second thing that Google considers in the churches that appear at the top of these local search rankings is name, address, phone number. I'm going to break that down in just a moment. The third is Google My Business, your Google My Business page. Oops, sorry. Every time I say Google, my computer wants to search something for me. Okay, Google My Business page. And then fourth is citations. And so I'm going to break each of these down for you, with the exception of physical location. I think you understand that one. And I'm going to go from simplest to most complex, okay? The simplest is name, address, phone number. Every page on your website should have your name, address, phone number. The church's name, the church's address, the church's phone number. Most churches will include that in the footer of their website so that it's on every single page. But that's one of the things that Google is looking at. If Google doesn't know your name, address, phone number, doesn't know how you match up with the geographic search that someone is doing when they're searching for a local church, okay? So that's pretty simple. Make sure that your website has a name, address, phone number on every page, exactly as you want the church to be known. The second is your Google My Business, okay? The church name on the website, the address and the phone number need to match what's in your Google My Business. Now, if you don't know what a Google My Business is, it is this thing that you see on the right side of this screen. So if I did a desktop search and I searched for, I can't remember what I searched. I searched Grace Community Church in Goshen, Indiana. So I have, this is the organic search result that comes up for that. On the left side, on the right-hand side is the actual Google My Business, okay? And you can see in the Google My Business, it has the address, it has a phone number, it has a listing of how many reviews they have. There's links to the website, directions, and you can save it to your phone or save it to your computer. If you're on a mobile device, there's usually a little phone emblem where you can actually click it and it'll dial the phone number for you. And this is called Google My Business. Now, this is one of Google's ways of trying to make search results easier and more convenient for its users. Remember, Google's entire business platform is based on providing the right answer to the question that the person is asking online. And so Google's trying to shortcut you having to make decisions as a user with a church that's near you or a church in your area by simply giving you one in a Google My Business. If you don't know if you have a Google My Business, Google your church, find the Google My Business page, and click on this button that says Own This Business. If you click on that button, it will say this business has never been claimed, and then you follow the instructions to claim it. What they're going to do is they're going to actually send you a card with a code on it to the physical location of your church so that you can verify that you are physically there. For those of you who are church plants or maybe in portable churches, there are workarounds on this. You will have to work with, if you're renting a school or a YMCA or meeting in another church building's location, there are some ways around this, and I can answer questions about that offline. But you need to claim your Google My Business. The reason you need to claim it is that you need to manage it. Google rewards local businesses with more local SEO juice if they are active and managing their Google My Business page. The things that you do to manage it are updating photos, by posting events or activities that you're having, and by soliciting reviews from your fans and then responding to those reviews. If your church has not had a new review in Google My Business for the last year, Google's going to question whether or not you're actually open. And secondly, it's not going to think that you're very good at what you do. But when people are giving you 4-star and 5-star reviews, Google says they're in business and they're good at what they do, and I'm going to give them more local SEO authority. And people are actually searching in your area, best church near me, best church in my city. How do you think Google decides what the best churches are? Well, Google decides what the best churches are based on the number of Google reviews. If you have 4 reviews and a 5-star, but there's another church down the street that has 40 reviews and 5 stars, you're going to rank lower than that church in those types of rankings. So if you haven't claimed your Google My Business, make sure you do that. Make sure that you update photos. Google will automatically populate photos on your Google My Business page with geo-tagged photos that people have posted on Facebook and Instagram or in their own Google profile. I was on a call with a church a few weeks ago here in the Dallas area, actually quite a large church, probably about 1,800 people. And I went to the Google My Business page with the communications director, and they have never added their own photos. And all of the photos that they had showing on their Google My Business page were from some international ministry that they support, where this group of men had slaughtered a cow and were preparing it to eat. And so this is an urban church in Dallas, Texas. And if you went to their website or went to their Google My Business page, all of the photos look like they're sacrificing a cow. And I'm not joking. I actually started to throw the photo into the slide presentation here, but I forgot. So it was kind of embarrassing for them. So you can remove photos by requesting them to be removed, saying this isn't a photo of this place, this isn't a photo of this church, if you don't want the photos or flag them inappropriate. And then you need to add your own photos and add photos that will help people decide whether or not you're a good fit for them. So Google My Business, get in there, claim it, and use it. Now, the third thing that I want to talk about here in terms of things that Google is using to determine who gets in the local pack are called citations. Now, this is not like a citation that the police give you. This is like a citation as in a directory listing saying that you actually exist in more than 2 places. You exist in more than just your own website and on your Google My Business page. There are other authorities that recognize your existence. These are called citations. Some people for short might, well, it's longer, but it makes more sense, call them directory listings. And when you work with a digital marketing agency or someone that can help you with this, they can run for you what's called a citation report. And a citation report will show you how you're doing in local citations. Now, this particular church, this is Grace Church of Goshen, Indiana. They have a citation score for key citations. There are 36 directories that Google sees as being the most authoritative, but there are more than 200 that it actually cross-references. So Google, when someone does a local search, Google looks at the website, the name, address, phone number, looks at the Google My Business page, and then it cross-references these hundreds of other directories to decide if you deserve to be at the top of those local search rankings. And in this particular case, Grace in Goshen has 22 of the key citations are actually found. There's 14 that they're not listed in. 19 of them are correct, and 3 of them actually have errors. This is just sort of a snapshot of the first page of their actual report, but you'll see that on Facebook, the top directories, these are some of the top authoritative directories that, that Google uses. In Facebook, their actual name on their Facebook page is Grace Community Church, Goshen. Well, that makes sense to you and it makes sense to me, but Google is looking for matching. Google is digital. Google is not intuitive, not yet anyway. And so Google sees that as not being a match. If you look down at the Merchant Circle listing there, this church many, many years ago was actually called Grace Brethren Church. And somehow it got listed in the Merchant Circle directory, which I don't even know what Merchant Circle is, but Google gives it a high authority in terms of its listings, and Google considers that an error. And then of course you can see all the ones that are blank. The ones that are blank are probably websites, directories you've never even heard of, but the church is not listed in those. So the goal with citations is to actually be listed in all of Google's key citation directories, as well as hundreds of others, and have all of the information correct. If your church has ever moved locations, as this one did, you can see that Grace Brethren Church used to be at 1801 West Clinton, and now it's at 276 County Road, 36. If you've ever changed a phone number, if you've ever changed an address, if you've ever changed your church name, there's a very good chance that you have incorrect listings in these citations, and that hurts your ability to rank in local searches. I'm going to share with you a way that you can sort of address this at the end of our time together today. So that's citation. So those are the things, the main things that Google's looking at: your name, address, phone number, Google My Business, citations. Why is this so important? And why did I say if you don't learn anything else today, learn this? Because these are ring to people. These are people who are on their phone or on their computer and they're looking for a church. Don't you want to show up? Don't you want to be at the top? The statistics show that the businesses that are in the top of the local pack are 50% more likely to be clicked than those that are below on the list. And if you're not even in the first page, if you don't even show up in the first 20, forget about it. If I'm looking for a dentist or I'm looking for an eye doctor, I'm not going to page 2 or page 3. I'm going to probably go to the first page and I'm looking for the ones with great reviews, and I'm not even going to bother. The only time we go into page 2 and page 3 is when we're a pastor preparing for a sermon and we're looking for that deep nugget in the internet that didn't show up on page 1. But for the most part, we need to make sure that our church is in the top page at the very least, and if not in the top, if not in the local pack, at least in the top page. All right, let's move on to Google organic SEO. What makes Google happy? There are a lot of things that make Google happy, but these are the 3 that are probably in the most in control. You have the most control over these things, okay? Speed, security, and crawlability. And I'm going to explain each of those in a little more detail. The first one is security. HTTP versus HTTPS, okay? Basically, when you have a website, there's a thing called a security certificate that encrypts the back end of your website and prevents hackers from embedding malicious code or content on your website. Google does not like unsecure websites. So you automatically lose domain authority, search authority, when you don't have a secure website. You'll know that you don't have a secure website if you don't have the S showing up after the HTTP, or if you have an exclamation point where the padlock is on this particular image, okay? The padlock shows me that it's secure. An exclamation point shows that it's not secure. You may have searched something on Google sometime and you clicked a link and all of a sudden you got this notification on your screen that says, this is an unsecure website and I'm not gonna send you there. I have no idea exactly why Google decides sometimes to send us to unsecure sites and other times it doesn't. But the last thing that we want is to someone search for your church, click on the link, and end up with that security warning saying this isn't a secure website. Secondly, you don't want your website hacked and infecting all the people's computers or mobile devices who come to your website. So make sure that your website is secure. In some cases, if you're using a platform like Squarespace or Wix, it's literally a matter of clicking a button on the back end that makes it secure. I don't know why those types of platforms don't make them automatically secure, but you have to enable the security. If you're in a WordPress website or something that's more custom, and in some cases, other church website management systems will require that you actually have a third-party security certificate installed. You can hire someone to do that. In some cases, your own web host will be able to do that for you. The cost could range anywhere from free to $1,000, just depending on your scenario. But it's worth having a secure website because it both keeps your website secure and it also helps improve your organic search. Second thing that makes Google happy is speed. Google likes a fast website. Slow speed, a slow loading website results in more bounces. A bounce is when someone clicks on the link, goes to the site, and immediately leaves. You've done it. You've clicked on a website. It was taking too long to load, and so you just hit back on your browser. You don't want that happening to your church website. If somebody clicked on it, they're interested in something. So let's deliver what they're looking for as quickly as we can. Google hates bounces. Google wants people to find what they're looking for. And if they're bouncing from your website, then there's a very good chance that they're not finding what they're looking for. So what are some of the things that affect the speed of our website? Actually, before we get to that, if you want to do a test to your website, Google Page Speed Insights. This is actually a Google tool. Page Speed Insights. You can put your website address in there and do an analysis, and it'll give you a score, and it will give you some really technical stuff as to why it's slow. But I see very, very few church websites in the 90 to 100 range. I would say if you can get out of the red, get into the orange at the very least. But we don't want to be in the red. The red is a slow website. Some of the things that make your website slow: images that are not optimized for web. They're too big, and so it takes too long for them to download. Embedded videos, which can sometimes be very large files. Sometimes it's your server host performance. Sometimes you've picked a server and their host, your server host is too far away, or their servers are slow. Sometimes it's dense JavaScript. If you're using a platform like Wix or ShareFaith or a number of these other church custom website builders, a lot of times they'll have way more JavaScript in the back end than is necessary for the site, and that can sometimes slow things down. Same thing with bloated CSS, which is your cascading style sheet. Again, this is all very technical. Excessive HTTP requests, 404 errors, which is related to missing files. At the end of the day, not using an expert to look at your website and to help you manage these things can result in a slow website. If your website is slow, you need to go to someone and have them take a look to see if they can fix it for you. If you had a car that was not operating properly, some of you would probably get under the hood and you would change the spark plugs and change some hoses, belts, and valves, or whatever it is that you do to make your car run better. Most of us, we take our car to an expert. But in the website world, especially with churches, we have a tendency to try to do everything in-house. Sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you need to have an expert get under the hood and take a look and see what the problems are with the website performance. In some cases, if you have a WordPress website or a Rock website or something, or a Squarespace website that's sort of open source, there's a lot that can be done to speed it up. If you're on a template-based website, sometimes there's not much that can be done, but it's always worth checking with an expert to see what they can do. The third thing that makes Google happy is what's called crawlability. So to simplify what crawlability is that Google, when you do a Google search, Google is not searching the internet in that particular second. Google has actually been constantly crawling the internet and storing billions and billions of website data in its own memory bank. And so when you're doing a search on the internet, Google's searching its own memory bank and providing you data that it's already crawled. So there are these crawlers that are constantly, some people call them spiders or crawlers, they're constantly going through websites on the internet and gathering data and bringing it back to Google's servers, okay? Websites like the ESPN website or the CNN website, where there's news being propagated on a consistent, regular basis, those websites are being crawled continuously. Websites like church websites that don't have continuously updated content might get crawled once a month, might be crawled once a year. So it's really important that we make sure that when we set up our website that it's highly crawlable and that Google's getting good information, because it might be a while before Google comes back to get new information. So we want to make sure that we set up our website to be as crawlable as possible. So here are some tips that can make your, actually, here's another website you can go to. It's called Site Checker, SiteChecker, Site Checker. You can actually go and you can do a free site check. I think to get all the information, you have to have a paid account, but you can get some basic information about some things that might be broken on your website that's preventing it from being crawlable. Some of the time, most of the time, it's pretty technical stuff. But again, it's a good place to start so you can at least do a litmus test to see how your website's doing. Improving crawlability, I'll break it down into 3 simple things that you can do. One is to manage your H1 and H2 headings properly. You may or may not know what H1 and H2 headings are, so I'll break that down for you. H1 headings, in every website platform, there are different types of text that you can use on your page. Whether you're using WordPress or using Wix, they might not all use H1, H2. They might just say heading 1 or heading 2. That's what the H stands for. When Google crawls a page, the first thing that it's looking at is the H1 and the H2. It's looking to see what the content on the page is all about. This is a page that I built for Assist Church Expansion, where we're populating it with resources to help churches during COVID-19. So you'll notice the H1 heading here is explicit, COVID-19 resources for your church, okay? I tried to make that an answer to somebody's question. if somebody was Googling COVID-19 resources for my church. Google knows what's on this page. The H2 is like the subtitle or the subheading. Videos, documents, and other tools to help your church navigate the coronavirus crisis. Okay, I made this as explicit as I could because I'm trying to make my H1 and my H2 match with what people are potentially searching. Okay, now this is an example of a page on a church website that does the opposite of what I did. They do not have an H2, and their H1 is Power Kids. Now that's the name of their children's ministry, and there's nothing wrong with the name of that children's ministry. The problem is no one in their geographic area is probably Googling Power Kids. People might be Googling discipleship for my children, how to teach my kids about Jesus, church programs for my kids. Those are the types of things that people are searching for. So in this particular case, if this church asked me, which they didn't, I would say, great, you've got Power Kids in the graphic at the top of the page. That tells me what your children's ministry is called. How about changing the H1 to reflect something like Children's Ministry for Akron, Ohio, and then an H2 that actually explains what we do in our Power Kids program. I want the H1 and the H2 answer the question that the Googler is Googling. And we do this in churches all the time with our student ministry or different ministries that we have. We come up with clever names, but those clever names don't necessarily always help us. Maybe if you run Re-Engage, marriage ministry at your church, some people will search Re-Engage because it's a brand name program. Maybe like Celebrate Recovery is a brand name program. But you also want to make sure that your H1 and your H2 reflect the kind of content that people would actually be searching. So if you have a marriage ministry, your H1 might say, Re-Engage marriage ministry in Dallas, Texas, or Columbus, Ohio, or wherever you are. And then the H2 is helping families in our community have better and healthier marriages, or something of that nature, so that it really answers the question of what the person is searching for online. So that's basically H1 and H2 in a nutshell. Meta descriptions are another thing that are important to our crawlability. Meta descriptions are basically what show up when our church is listed in a search. So this is a church in my neighborhood, and I can tell you that they don't actually have anything written in their meta description on their church website. Google has searched it, doesn't find any information, so has basically just taken the first paragraph of text that it can find on the page and has populated this area for the meta description. A great meta description is important for two things. One, it reinforces the content that's on the page. Two, it entices the searcher to click. So when I read this, Preston Ridge has moved our gatherings online for the foreseeable future. I mean, unless I was looking for an online church, that doesn't really answer probably the question that I was looking for. But here's an example of a really well-written meta description. Grace Fellowship Church of Lemersville and Altoona, okay? So number one, it tells me that it's a church and it's in two different locations. And then it goes on to say Grace Fellowship is a family-friendly Christian church serving the communities of Lemersville and Altoona, Pennsylvania. Boom. So I know if I'm looking through the search results, what this church is all about. I've helped Google and I've helped the searcher make a decision as to whether or not they want to actually click on this link. So if you want to know if you have good meta descriptions on your pages, and every single page needs to have its own unique meta description, go to this website called Hey Meta. And then you can put in every page on your website, search it, and it will show you what your meta description is if you have one or if you don't. If you don't have one, for every page on the website, a unique one that describes the content that's on that page, then you need to log into your website platform, your content management system, find the place where you enter a meta description and write a unique meta description for every single page on the website. Super, super important, okay? The third thing is HTML content. This is how you improve crawlability. HTML content is anything that's written on the website that Google can actually read and compare to your H1 and H2 heading and meta description to determine that the page is actually really about what you say the page is about. This is an area where churches tend to struggle because we seem to think that the less we put on the pages, the better. The truth is, the more we put on the page, the better. It's really more about structure than it is about content. The types of things that you might have where you have HTML content are ministry pages, topical pages on biblical topics or faith-based topics or felt need topics, blog, and sermon content. Your pastor's creating content every single week that is searchable if it's written in HTML. If you're just posting the video on the web page, it's not searchable. I'm going to share a little bit more with you on how we can improve that in just a few minutes. Think about H1, H2, and meta as sort of a cover of a book. Remember the old days when you used to go to Chapters or some bookstore and you'd pick up a book and you wanted to know what it was about? You'd start with the title. That's your H1. Then you look at the H2, the subtitle. In this case, it's boundaries. How to say yes, how to say no to take control of your life. Okay, I have a pretty good idea. The meta description would be the equivalent of what's written on the inside flap or on the back cover. So if I'm Google, the first thing I'm looking at is the title. Then I'm looking at the subtitle. Are they consistent? Do they tell me what's on the page? Then I'm going to read the inside cover and the back page. That's the meta description. And then Google will crawl the entire page, and Google is looking to make sure that the title, the H1, the H2, and the meta description and the content on the page are all consistent. The more consistent they are, the higher authority that page has in Google search rankings. Okay. Hope that makes sense. You can ask questions about that in a few minutes when we have a short little break for answering questions. Okay, so there's 3 different ways that we can do digital outreach to connect with more Ring 2 and Ring 3 people. Organic, which we talked about, local, and then on page. Now we're going to talk a little bit about interruptive. This is going to be fairly brief. Interruptive is basically what we do when we're interrupting what other people are doing. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Google Ads. Okay, when I say Google Ads here, I'm specifically talking about Google Display Network, which are graphic ads that are placed on different websites that sell their space to Google for those ads. Nobody goes to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Google, or any website looking for ads. Yet, every one of these platforms gives you the ability as a church to place ads where people are doing other things. It's kind of like the commercial that interrupts your program when you're watching television, if you still watch television. So when we talk about interruptive, we're talking about running campaigns, ad campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Google. They are extremely cost effective. They are very, very effective. If you're trying to reach middle-aged and older people, Facebook is where you want to be. If you're trying to reach young adults, YouTube is where you want to be. Instagram ads, in my experience, and I've run probably 50 different Facebook, Instagram campaigns in the last year to year and a half. Instagram is not a very effective platform for advertising, in my personal opinion. People just scroll right through ads on Instagram. It's that part of the demographic and it's part of the platform. YouTube, while most of us would say when an ad comes up on a YouTube video, we usually click the skip the ad button as soon as we possibly can, you would be surprised how many people don't. Because I'm running YouTube campaigns for churches that are finding a ton of success in running 25, 30-second ads on YouTube. They're geo-targeted to the community that you're in. They can be demographically targeted to the types of families, the types of people that you're trying to reach. And they're extremely, extremely effective. Google Display Network is similar to Facebook. You tend to get a slightly younger audience than Facebook. You tend to get more men on Google Display than you do on Facebook. Facebook is probably the most traffic because there's more people on Facebook than any other platform. If you're trying to reach younger people, if you're trying to reach men, YouTube is where you want to be. The third way that we reach more people is through pay-per-click or cost per click. And this is basically search advertising. This is my favorite way to reach people online because these are warm leads or hot leads, okay? Because pay-per-click or cost per click is actually showing up in a search result where someone is actually searching. There's 2 different ways that you can do this. You can do it with good old-fashioned cash. You can pay, or you can apply for a Google ad grant through the AdWords for Nonprofits program. Okay, so good old-fashioned cash means you set up a Google AdWords ad account, you put a credit card in it, you create a campaign, you set a daily spend limit, $5, $10, $100, whatever your church can afford, and then you build a campaign based on search words that you think people are searching in your area, and you can do research to figure that out. So if you're running a ministry, if you're running a 12-step recovery ministry or a marriage ministry or some sort of children's summer camp or vacation Bible school, you can create a short-term or a long-term campaign built around those specific keywords. So if people are searching, summer camp near me, or summer camp in Auburn, or summer camp in Phoenix, or wherever your church is, you can have AdWords campaigns that are built to show up at the top of the page in those searches. And you don't pay unless they click your ad, okay? Google Display Network also is a cost per click, but it's an image-driven. I guess you can do search word campaigns for Google Display as well. The Google Ad Grants is the most effective way of reaching the most people. Google offers up to $10,000 per month to qualifying 501c3s in Google AdWords advertising. It's an in-kind gift, okay? Now, it's really, really hard to get $10,000 a month, really, really hard, but it's not difficult to get $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 a month. You have to know what you're doing. And in most cases, with most churches, I recommend that there are a number of different agencies. One of the ones that I do work with actually provides the service, but you pay an agency to manage the campaigns for you. You pay them a monthly fee, and then they manage the campaigns for you. And the return on the investment can be substantial. I met with a church yesterday that's doing it. They're paying a company, I want to say $300, $400 a month to manage their Google Ad Grants campaigns for them. So it's about $100 a week, and they're getting about $2,000 to $2,500 a month in Google Ad Grant advertising. So the return on that investment is substantial, and that means literally thousands of new people visiting their website every single month through the Google Ad Grant program. I'm going to tell you at the end of our session today how you can get more information about the Google Ad Grant for Nonprofits. This is what an ad looks like in pay-per-click or cost per click. Typically shows up at the top of the page above the local pack. Sometimes Google will actually throw an ad in the local pack. The best thing you can ever possibly do is actually have an ad that shows up at the top of the page and then also be in the local pack. Do you think if your church showed up in 2 out of the 4 top spots that it's more likely to get clicked on? I would say yes. So we want to drive more traffic to the website, to our front door. All right, so I'm going to pause for a minute and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. If you have any questions, you can either pop them into chat if you want to chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. We'll take a few minutes here to kind of address any questions that you have in the moment about any of the things that we've talked about. And then we'll move on to sort of the final piece that I wanted to share with you today. If you've got a question, make sure you unmute yourself.
So when you're creating ads, is it better to just be very generic, or is it better to like have separate ads targeted to different audiences?
When you're talking about, what type of ads are you talking about? Are you talking about interruptive, like on Facebook or YouTube, or are you talking about search ads?
I guess either or. Probably search.
Okay, so I'll answer both questions. Unless you have a pretty substantial marketing budget for your church, digital outreach budget, I would say for interruptive campaigns, I recommend most churches try to budget for 3 to 4 large campaign events a year. And I typically say you want to have about $500. And I would say you want to definitely be running campaigns at Christmas and Easter. And then you want to point to maybe 2 other activities or events that you have during the year that you want to drive more traffic to your website with. And in which case, the ads that you're doing there would be ads that are targeted specifically for those types of events. So Christmas at our church, or Vacation Bible School, or Fall Harvest, or whatever event you might be promoting. And I would typically run those campaigns for about 3 weeks with about a $500 budget. Some churches have a much more substantial budget, and they will run Facebook or Instagram campaigns all year round. And they'll budget, $300 a month, usually $10 a day minimum is what I recommend to churches that they do. And they will basically be generic ads for their church. It's you're invited to our church type of campaign. Now, in terms of pay-per-click searches, I think both. You can do both. You can have search campaigns. You definitely want to geo-target them to your geographic area. So you can do that in a search campaign. You can pick a zip code or a geography around your church building. You want to, I would say in most cases, Google will recommend that you try to narrow your target audience to some degree without getting too specific. Especially depending on the types of keywords that you're using. So the more you narrow it, the less opportunity Google has to display your ad. So Google would prefer that you have a pretty wide audience. I'm running a campaign right now for a ministry in Georgia that we didn't put any age categories on it in terms of who we're targeting, because we feel like the ministry they have touch points for anybody at any different life point. But it's the way that you actually build the ads that Google will then display the ads in a way. Google actually has what are called responsive ads. So the ads show up on the searcher's page based on the types of words that they're searching. So you can build a campaign for your church, which is, if your church is in Columbus, Ohio, you can build an entire campaign around churches in Columbus, and all the keywords are built around church in Columbus, Ohio, Bible church, Christian church, church for unchurched people, whatever keywords you want to use. You can also run ad groups for specific ministries. So you can run an entire campaign for children's ministry and children's programs and children's discipleship and that sort of thing. Or you can run specific campaigns for different events. A lot of it is dependent on your budget. And that's one thing that I can help you with is we can talk about what your budget is and then strategize the most effective way of using that budget to reach the most people possible. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I'd answer that. If you have a follow-up, feel free to ask it. Yeah. Tom Hawking asked,
so
how do we...
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, we serve two, very different communities. So we have one basically zip code that's very mono-ethnic, and then we have another zip code that's very multi-ethnic. And so would it be beneficial to have a generic ad that reaches both, or to have one ad that focuses on the mono-ethnic community and then do a separate one that features the multi-ethnic community?
If you're using Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing, where it's visual ads, I would say, you want to use imagery that is authentic to your church community. So just make sure that you're not doing a bait and switch saying, hey, we all look like this. But if you don't, then don't use those types of photos. If you're doing search campaigns,
for sure.
if you're doing search campaigns, when you build a campaign, you're actually not creating an ad. You're actually creating a lot of different ads that can show up based on the different keywords and the different things that people are searching. So they're text-based ads. So in some cases, if you're, I don't know how to answer the question. Is there a different way of doing text-based ads that appeal to different ethnic demographics? I'm not really sure. If you're using visual ads, for sure, you want to be sensitive to the communities that you're trying to reach and be authentic about who you are. If you're doing search campaigns, you just want to think about what the searcher is searching, like what questions are people actually asking, and then build your campaigns around that. Because if you're building your campaigns with keywords that nobody's actually using in their searches, then Google won't display your ads. So you want to make sure you're using words that that people are actually searching. So that might be different in the different communities based on the needs of the different people in those communities. Tom Hawking asks, how do we get a citation report? At the very end of our time today, I'm going to, well, actually, as a follow-up to the session today, I'm gonna send you an email with contact information for a colleague of mine at Missional Marketing who can actually do that for you. He can run a citation report for you at no cost, and we'll meet with you to share that citation report with you, and then help you strategize as to how to tackle what needs to be tackled there. Hope that answers that question. You can, technically to get a citation report, there are a number of different like web developer SEO tools that web developers would use for that, or marketing agencies would use for that. You have to typically have a subscription to those services, and they're not cheap. So you go to someone who has an account already and get them to run it for you. Any other questions? All right, we'll have another time to answer some questions here at the end. I don't have a ton left for you, but I do have a few more important things. So let's talk for a few minutes. We talked about outreach. Basically, all that we've talked about so far is really how to reach more people with our web presence. The next thing we're going to talk about is content. Remember, content is what you distribute online that allows people to know that, to decide whether or not you're a good fit for them. Okay, so what you distribute online that allows people to decide if you're a good fit. So that includes your website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on. Podcast you might have, Twitter, if you're actually using Twitter. All of these things, the goal of all of this social media engagement should ultimately be to drive people to your website. Let's get people to the website. Remember, all of these channels are the front porch of your church. The website is the front door. There's only so deep we can go in the conversation on social before we bring people into the front door so that they can actually consume the meat of our content and really decide whether or not we're a good fit for them. So one of the things we want to do is optimize your homepage for new visitors, because we're trying to bring new visitors to our website, people who don't yet know anything about us. Our outreach has caused people to maybe consume some of our content on social media or our YouTube page. Now they're coming to our website, they're checking the front door, they're looking in the windows. What is it that they actually see? Okay, two things we want to make sure we do is we act with simplicity. Okay, we don't want to make new visitors dig, so we want to try to think 2 steps ahead of what a new visitor would be looking for when they come to our website. And I always say, let's think about your own personal neighbor who's far from God, who perhaps hasn't ever been to a church in their life, or if they have, it's been a really long time. They assume that if they show up at your church that they're going to get struck by lightning because they know they haven't been living the way they need to be living. What do you want them to see? What's the first thing you want that person to see? And secondly, we want to be super, super clear. Don't use insider language. Do the best that you can. The website is not the place for you to be casting vision, mission, values for your church and using all your insider language. Most churches do it. It's not what you want on your homepage. Okay, I was consulting with a church yesterday. The first thing on their homepage is, we believe in verse by verse Bible preaching. It's great. So if all they're trying to do ever is reach ring 2 people, then they've probably solved the problem. But I know that that's not the question that most ring 3 people are trying to get answered. Oh, that's exactly, your unchurched neighbor, that's just not what that's not what they're interested in. So let's think 2 steps ahead of that person who doesn't yet know us and hasn't been to our church website. Okay, we're going to start with a benefit statement. We're going to include a plan of visit link, a watch on demand link, staff page, photos of people in your church, and calls to action. I'm going to give you some examples of each of these. We're going to talk about what each of them is. Let's start with the benefit statement. The benefit statement is above the fold, meaning it's on the top of the page when someone loads on the page. You remember the above the fold comes from the old newspaper was folded in half. The best news is always at the top of the front page above the fold. So your benefit statement is above the fold. It is not your mission statement, okay? It is a you statement, not a we statement. We're trying to connect with where people are who are searching with us. And so what we want to do is we want to identify common ground. Most of us think of our website as a billboard about us and who we are. But I want to challenge you to think about your website as being that place where you're trying to find common ground with the people that you're trying to reach for Jesus. And so we try to use you statements 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 versus we statements. And fourth, the benefit statement addresses a felt need, or it answers their question. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little quiz on a couple of benefit statements based on what I just shared with you. And nobody's answers are going to be made public here, but I'm going to launch a little poll and you can answer. And I want you to click which one of these is not a benefit statement. So it should have come up on your screen there. You can click it. I'm going to give you, I don't know, 15 seconds, 20 seconds to read through those and decide which one is not a benefit statement as I just described it. I'm gonna give you 5 more seconds. Okay, so here's our results. Proudly, no one picked number 2. Most everybody picked number 1, helping people experience the life of Christ. Now, the reason that's not, I'll just explain it to you, those of you who may not have, did I share the results? There we go, now you can see them. Those of you who did not pick that one, the reason that is not a benefit statement is that to an unchurched person who lives next door to you, who doesn't know the last thing about Jesus Christ, they have no idea what life of Christ is. And it's probably not what they're searching. Now, the third one there, a couple of people said that one, when you discover how much God really loves you, it will change everything about your life. That's maybe not the best benefit statement, but it is sort of a benefit statement because people are wondering how they can know God and how their life can be improved. So I would say, at the very least, we all recognize that the second one was a good benefit statement. I'm going to give you another one. Here's another one. How do I get to the second one? Here we go. All right, here we go. Which of the following is a benefit statement? Which one is a benefit statement? Ten more seconds. Last chance. And we're ending it. All right. Almost everybody responded and we all got it right. At Grace Church, you'll find a safe place to ask all the tough questions about life, faith, and what comes next. That is a benefit statement. It's probably not your mission statement. It's not your vision statement. It's not probably what you're communicating internally on a regular basis, although I would hope that it is something you're communicating on an internal basis, so people in your church know that they can invite their unchurched, unsaved, far from God friends to have a safe place where they can answer those questions. These other two, honestly, I pulled right off of church websites. We strive to proclaim the good news of Christ through worship ministry and outreach missions. Nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great thing for a church to do. It's just not what I would be leading with if I'm trying to reach unchurched people. So good job. You all passed the test. Okay. Now let's take a look at Plan a visit. Prior to COVID, I would say that the plan a visit button on your website is the 100% absolute most important thing on your website. Where should a plan a visit button be? It should be right next to the benefit statement. In this case, this website, helping people experience abundant life for now and forever. It's an okay benefit statement, but the plan a visit button takes the cake, right? We know exactly what we're doing here. I want to plan a visit. Now, what should be on your plan a visit page? Time and location. Where do I park? What do I do once I go inside? What's for children? How do I dress? How long will the service last? Do I have time to give money? Will there be people like me? That last one, that's what people want to know. Will there be people like me? Remember, at this point, people are still trying to decide if you're a good fit for them. And one of the ways that they know that you're a good fit for them is if they see people in photos or on videos where there will be people like them. A lot of times churches want to have a pre-registration for children button on the plan a visit in person. So notice I did include, I made this plan a visit in person. I'm explaining that in just a minute. Yeah, maybe you have a registration button for children's ministry. Maybe you have a link to where people can ask questions before they come. I saw one church that had literally a video to answer every one of these questions, like a 15-20 second video embedded on the page where it was both the question and somebody on the staff or somebody in the church answering the questions. Make it creative, make it clear, make it easy for them to attend. Address any possible objection that somebody might have as to why they've gotten this far on your website, but they might still avoid or resist visiting your church in person. Okay, so that's plan a visit in person. Let's talk about plan a visit online. In fact, I'll back up here and I will say that a lot of churches now that I'm seeing that are still doing online services and they're doing in-person services will actually split the top of their homepage with two different buttons. One is plan an in-person visit or plan your visit, and the other is visit online or plan your online visit. So I think that there's value in having both of those. If you're doing both of those practices right now, you want to have a plan a visit online page. And on that page, you want to have times. You want to have your broadcast channels. Are you doing Facebook? You doing Instagram? Facebook? You doing YouTube? You doing Vimeo? Is it plugged in through your church website? Whatever channel. You want to have an online connection card at some point because you want to have a place where people can give you permission if they decide in that time that they want to give you permission. They want to connect with you, and then online giving. Now, a lot of churches that are doing online services are actually putting their online links on their homepage. And when you click it, it immediately takes them to their Facebook page or their YouTube page. And I will tell you that that actually works against you in the Google world. Because what that tells Google is that somebody came to your homepage, maybe they searched church online, church live stream, how to watch church on the internet, and you're running a Google search ad, and your church came up and they clicked on it, and their very next click was leaving your website. That tells Google that they didn't find what they were looking for, because there are no businesses in the world that actually bring people to their website only to have them leave on their first click. You don't want somebody's first click to be leaving the website. You want their first click to be to another page on your website. So that's why I say have a plan a visit for online rather than all the online information on the first click. There's a large church planting ministry in the United States, probably one of the largest ones. And when they coach their church planters on launching their websites, they tell them to put the time and location above the fold on their website. And all that does is it causes somebody to come to the homepage and find what they're looking for without having to click anywhere else. And it kind of works against the Google algorithm, because if people don't go anywhere else on the website, Google doesn't think people are finding what they're looking for. And what we want is we want that plan a visit or a time and location button at the top that causes someone to click one more time, but then give them the information they're looking for. Think 2 steps ahead of where the newcomer, the new guest, the unchurched person is wanting to have their information directed. Okay. More optimizing your homepage for new visitors. Watch on demand. Now you'll notice that I'm literally using the term that unchurched people in the world would use. I don't want to see a sermons button or sermon library button or past sermons button or past messages button. I want to use watch on demand. Why would I use watch on demand? Because that's what an unchurched, dechurched, churchless person, that's the language they use. They know what watch on demand means. That means I can go and I can watch sermons on demand, or I can watch the last service on demand, okay? I heard a thing this morning on a podcast that there are some churches that are now doing, churches that are doing both in-person and online services. They're no longer calling their online service an online service. They're calling it an episode. Why are they calling it an episode? Because that's what an unchurched person would call it. It's not really a service. It really is an episode. So they're calling them episodes. Now, I'm not saying that that's what everybody needs to do, but I'm just kind of sharing that with you because it's an indication of sort of where we need to be thinking. We're thinking 2 steps ahead of where our unchurched, churchless, and dechurched people are. And they're thinking watch on demand. They see watch on demand. It's a call to action. It tells them to do something, and that means something to them. Okay, here's a great example of a sermon video library. This is a church in Louisiana. I love what they've done with this. This is their sort of their watch on demand section. They've built it out. It looks just like Netflix. What I really like about it is that when you click on a sermon, every single sermon is on its own page. And you'll see that there's a description of it. There's a place to download sermon notes. It's just a YouTube video embedded here on this page. But the best part about it is you'll see at the bottom of the page here, there's a thing that says transcription, okay? And this is actually the transcript of the pastor's sermon. So you watch the video, no human being is ever going to actually click that button that says read more and read the entire 8,000 word transcript. But guess who reads the 8,000 word transcript? Google reads it. Right? Google is reading it. So this makes this a highly searchable page because we have an H1, words men want to hear. H2, lessons we can learn from the parable of the prodigal son. A description of the page. This is basically what you'd see in the meta description, categories and tags. And basically the way that this is built out is that if you click on these tags, it will actually bring you to a page that shows you other sermons that are tagged in the same category or with the other topical tags. So it's a great way to display your content. One page, like this with all the sermons is not searchable. Google will never really find anything. People are not going to find your sermons when they're distributed like this, but when they're distributed like this, people will find them online. The other thing that's really beneficial is if you get that Google ad grant, you can actually run search campaigns and drive people directly to your sermon pages. So if you're doing a teaching series on parenting or on hope or on overcoming anxiety or grief or something of that nature, you can build out a page just like this and run ads right to that page so people find exactly what they're looking for online. Okay, so that's the watch on demand. The next thing is the staff page. Staff page is super important. The reason the staff page is super important, it's usually one of the most visited pages on a church website because people want to know who's in charge and they want to know if they can trust them. And I see a lot of church websites there where there is no staff page, or the staff page only has the senior pastor, doesn't really say much about them. People want to know who's in charge, and they want some sense that somebody's in charge and they look trustworthy. So Phil Sparling, you look pretty trustworthy, so make sure that your picture is on your staff page. I'm sure it is. Just picking on Pastor Phil. All right, photos of people in your church. Okay. A strong temptation with churches sometimes is to try to be really creative and use fancy, cool pictures, sometimes using stock art. If you can avoid using stock art at all, please don't use stock art on your website. Use photos of your own people. I recommend that you once a year, twice a year, if you don't have somebody in your church that's a photographer, has a great camera, can take some good photos of faces of people in your church, I recommend that you budget, to hire somebody. If you're in a college town, find a student or somebody who does it, or studying marketing or something and can do it for you for a couple $100 and have them show up at an event or at a church service and give them carte blanche to take great photos of the people in your church. You'll be glad that you did. Use photos like the one on the left. It's a selfie with 3 ladies from your church. It's actually stock art, but I don't have pictures of people in your church. Exchange that photo with people in your church, but not the one on the right. The one on the left helps the unchurched, churchless, dechurched person decide whether or not they might fit in. The one on the right, people got questions and they're not really sure why everybody has their hands up and asking questions. That's what the unchurched person is thinking. Do this. This shows people on the left having a Bible study. Not this on the right, which is just a gray, scary picture of a Bible. Okay. We want people to find hope in the Word of God. The one on the right does not communicate hope, but I see photos like that on church websites all the time. Show what community life is really like in your church. Do this. Look at this. Small group people sitting around drinking tea, having conversation, praying together. That's what we want our church community and authenticity to look like, not that on the right. Use the one on the left, not the one on the right. Do this, not this. Don't lead with the building picture. Don't lead with your church building. Lead with the people in your church. Again, people don't really care what your building looks like. That's why church plants that meet in smelly, sweaty elementary school gyms can do really well. It's about the people that are there, not about the building. Do this, not this. Okay, people standing around. He's not smoking. I think he's eating something, the guy in the front of that picture. Okay, eating ice cream or something like that. Not the steeple in the building. People want to see what the people in your church look like and whether or not they will fit in. The last thing that I want to emphasize for your homepage is call to action. So we've already talked about a few call to actions: plan a visit, watch on demand, call to action. Right now I have a pastor friend of mine who's in the Bronx, New York. His church is a church plant that meets in a school. They're indefinitely out of the school. He's trying to connect with more people online. He's getting lots of traffic to his website. So he just put a button on his homepage that said submit a prayer request. And every day since he's put that button on his homepage, he's had somebody click and give him a prayer request. He's recording a short video of himself encouraging them and praying for them and then emailing that video back. They've given him permission. That call to action has basically he's getting a name and an email address and a prayer request, and he's taking advantage of that by doing something that's encouraging for them. People in our world right now are hurting. Many of them are hopeless. Many of them are looking for someone who can guide them. So put any calls to action on your website that you can that will help people reach out to you and make that connection. So connection, the point at which a new person provides their personal information, giving you permission to communicate with them. Number one, we've done outreach. We've informed them who we are, that we exist. Number two, they've consumed content. They've now made a decision that they want to connect with us. So what are we going to do to connect with them? Well, we can do a plan a visit. Some churches actually have an RSVP. There's a couple of plugins if you're in a WordPress website that can give people a chance to RSVP for the services. In some cases right now, people have to RSVP because you have limited attendance in your church buildings. What a great opportunity to get permission from people by getting their contact information. I already talked about prayer requests. You can do a meet a pastor, maybe it's a Zoom with a pastor right now. Okay, get somebody, give them a way to schedule a Zoom with a pastor. I use Calendly. Some of you know that I use Calendly. You can set up your own Calendly link, set it up with your Zoom account and schedule 15-minute meetings with Meet a Pastor. Get an opportunity to meet someone online. Gated content. Churches are really hesitant to do this. I understand why. Gated content is content that you have on your website that requires somebody giving you their email address in order to get it. Some churches I've talked to have experimented with things like, on their children's ministry page, it's a, download 5 devotionals that you can do with your kids at dinner this week. And in order to get that PDF, you have to submit an email address and then they get it via email. There's different ways that you can create unique, creative content. I heard of one church doing a thing where it's like, get our pastor's favorite places to eat in town on date night, right? And so every pastor of the church or every staff member on the church writes up a little thing about where they like to go, what they do on date night, their favorite restaurants, and you can make that gated content. They have to give you an email address to get it. Like I said, I understand churches are a little hesitant to do that, but maybe it's worth an experiment. Online connection card, I already talked about that, especially on your church online page. All right, that is the end of the content. I do have some wrap-up things that I'm going to share with you in just a minute, but I want to give you an opportunity to answer any questions that you might have before we call this a day. If you got them, you can either stick them in the group chat or you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hey, Bart.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I saw where some group was recommending that uh, in this COVID time, you have Zoom meetings through the week that invite people to either get acquainted with somebody or to, or if it's a search out who Jesus is or whatever, a follow-up, a way to get people to engage in something relationally through Zoom even. What do you think about that?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can help people take a next step in terms of their engagement. I talked to a guy named Jeff Reed, who is the director of digital church planting at Stadia. And I asked him, I said, okay, everybody's pivoted. Everybody's got an online service. What's the next step? And his response was, whatever your discipleship pathway is in person, you need to figure out how to do it online. So do you do that assimilation? How if you have an assimilation strategy in your church, meaning you have greeters who, when new people come, they take them to the information center. They get them to fill out a Connect card to get a free coffee mug or a t-shirt or whatever it is, or the children's ministry staff reaches out to someone after their kids have registered. There are points of contact that we're trying to make in person. How do we do that online? Do you have greeters on your Facebook page when you're doing your service? And they're greeting people as they come in and watch online. And if they do, what's the next step? Are they inviting them to go and join hey, we're gonna have a meet and greet the pastor after the service. He's gonna jump on a Zoom call. So if you're new and you want to meet the pastor, sure, do sometimes like it's the fellowship hall, right? Some of your churches, we'll have coffee and meet the pastor in the fellowship hall. Well, let's do it in a Zoom meeting. Or maybe you're inviting them to join a closed newcomer group for the church. And you have a Facebook group that's a closed group. And then once they join that closed group, you have hosts that now welcome them to that group. And then you set up a Facebook chat or another Zoom call or something where the pastor can meet and initiate with those types of people. I think thinking through your in-person assimilation strategy and your in-person discipleship pathway, we've got to figure out a way to deliver that content online, whether that's through Zoom calls, pre-recorded videos, a Facebook group. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Glue is the organization Glue. If any of you ever heard of Glue, they're going to be releasing a platform this summer. I can't remember what it's called. That's basically going to be a tool to help churches get their discipleship pathway and their assimilation online. So GLOO is the name of the company. You can Google their website. And right now they don't have a whole lot of information on the website about this new platform, but it should be coming soon. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, I just kind of wanted to know what you thought, because that is our goal. Our goal is to make disciples, and we shouldn't let COVID just be reduced to just audience.
Exactly. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
All right, let's see. Charity says, you said not to link to Facebook or YouTube. What are the other options? Not exactly what I said, Charity. I said, don't let that be the first click. So I wouldn't want someone leaving the website from the homepage as their first click. So now you can, if you use Vimeo Pro, you can embed your service on your website. There's a few, I think, Livestream, which I think Vimeo now owns. There are a few different ways that you can actually do that on your own web page. But I'm not saying Facebook or YouTube are wrong. In fact, I prefer YouTube personally because my smart TV has a YouTube. My smart TV has a YouTube app, so it's easier for me to watch church online on my TV with the YouTube app. I just wouldn't want a new visitor to my website. I don't want their first click to be taking them to Facebook or YouTube. Oh, thank you, Siri. I don't want, Siri's talking now. I don't know if you guys hear Siri. I just want, I don't want the first click to be leaving the website. So that's why I want to have that online service page. So their first click from the home page is to a second page that gives them the information about where they can watch the service online, which at that point you can take them to Facebook or YouTube. I hope that makes sense, Charity. Let's see. Tom asks, what was that service to schedule 15-minute Zoom meetings with a pastor? Calendly, Calendly. Okay. There is a free version of Calendly. I have a paid version and I can't honestly tell you what it costs. You can set up an integration with your Calendly, with a Calendly account. There's others that I'm sure you can do it with as well, and Zoom. And so whenever someone wants to book a meeting with me, I can actually send them a link, or you can actually have the link on your website where they click it. It shows them your availability on the calendar. They click it, they fill in their information, and it automatically generates a Zoom link for both of you. And so you get a notification. It goes on your Google Calendar or your iCalendar or whatever online calendar you use. And then you just know to show up and they show up. And so that's the way that works. And Tom, if you want to talk about that offline, I'm happy to have a call with you and I can show you the details on how that works. Let's see. Hunter says, the idea is to embed it into your website. Squarespace won't embed. However, the video plays through YouTube directly through our website. When you play the video, the user stays on our site, c4church.net, versus being sent to YouTube, etc. Most websites have an option to embed. Yeah, that's kind of what I was just saying. So you can't get a YouTube embed unless you have 1,000 subscribers to your page. You can if you have a Vimeo Pro account. You just have to pay for it. So you can actually go and pay 1,000 people to subscribe to your YouTube account, or you can pay for the Vimeo Pro account. I like the idea of keeping people on the website to watch the service online. It just helps your SEO. When Google sees that, you know, there were 40 or 80 or 140 people that clicked on your website and they all stayed there to watch the service, that's great. Now you got to make sure that your website can handle that kind of traffic, depending on the size of your church. But yeah, I like the idea of keeping people on the website. I'm not adverse though, you know, to using those other platforms. Like I said, I don't have a good browser on my smart TV. So my church broadcasts the service through the website, but I can't access it that way on my TV. I need to go to the YouTube channel. Let's see. Any other questions? Tim asks, would a new window click have the same impact as the first click off page? I asked that question to a guy a couple of weeks ago who knows more about this than I do. And his answer was, it's better to have a new window or a blank page open when you do that, because it does keep a person on your website. So that is certainly an option. So if you don't catch what I'm talking about, that if you click on that Facebook or that YouTube link, it opens a new window rather than leaving your website. Of course, at that point, you've still lost a click through on your website. So again, the goal is two of the things that Google measures in terms of your analytics are the number of people who spend more than 2 minutes on your website and the number of people who click more than 2 buttons or 2 clicks on your website. So forcing people to click to find their information is forcing people to click to find information is not a bad thing. You don't want them to have to click too much, but you definitely want to you definitely want to make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. So yeah, I think, you know, Hunter responded to that as well with the same response, was yes. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you have other questions, I'm going to give you an opportunity to connect with me offline and we can discuss them. Here's sort of follow up for you. I would love your feedback on this webinar, the content that we're sharing, things that you think might be helpful if I do this again. So you will get an email asking you for some feedback. And I just want you to be brutally honest with me if it was good, if it was not, if it was too short, if it was too long, if I went too much into the weeds with things. I'd love your feedback. I'm also going to ask for a little bit of context in that survey as to what your role is in your church, because obviously different people in the church are probably going to have different feelings about the content we've covered today. So please do the best that you can to help me out with that. I'm also going to send you a link through my Calendly, that if you want to set up a 30-minute consultation with me to talk about anything that I've discussed here today, to get more information about anything, we can do that. Those spots are going to be kind of spread out here over the course of the next few weeks. But I will give you an opportunity to set up a Zoom call with me, and I can answer more questions, point you in the direction of some other resources that you might like to have. I'm going to also, if you're interested in getting a local SEO report, I have a colleague in the Cleveland area who I can connect you with, who can get that report for you and then meet with you to discuss that report, and also the Google grant information. So in that survey, you'll have the opportunity to request that local SEO report and the Google grant information. If you do request that, the guy that will be connecting with you is a guy named David Thorne, and he is with an agency called Missional Marketing, and he'll follow up and provide the details of those services to you. I can certainly talk with you more about those in a 30-minute call if you want to have that call with me. But I'm just going to ask you to do one thing, like really just do one thing. Based on the content that you've learned today, do something. Maybe your first thing is just to actually go and search every single page and get your meta descriptions and write meta descriptions for every page. Maybe it's to talk to somebody about getting a Google grant application in. Maybe it's, maybe you need a whole new website and you need to talk about that. Come and talk to me and I can point you in the direction of some good sources and some ways to help. Maybe you need help making a budget. And again, that's something that I can help you take a look at, and we can talk about the best ways to utilize budget, find money in your budget that you can use for digital outreach. I really appreciate you all checking in with us today. I hope this has been helpful for you. The fact that you're still on the call tells me that it's been at least somewhat beneficial. And again, if there's anything that I can do to serve you, please let me know. With that, I'm going to sign off. God bless y'all. Have a good day.